Welcome back to the channel. I'm the Dynasty Football Strategist. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. In today's video, we're going over my top 10 Dynasty tight end rankings. Now, there's a common misconception that tight ends don't matter. Well, it depends on your league format, and it depends on which tight ends you actually own. Let's get into the video. Alright, at tight end 10, I have George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. So he's 6'4", 247, and he's 30.7 years old, so he is on the bit of the older end, which is why he's pushed down a little bit in these rankings. We don't know when exactly the bottom will come out from under him, so enjoy him while you can if you have him. If you want to sell him, you're probably not going to get what he's worth, but definitely enjoyed the top 5 production while it still lasts with him. So when we think about George Kittle, he's in San Francisco. He is a vertical tight end that stretches the seams and finds the soft spots against zone coverage in the defense. So his quarterback is Brock Purdy, accurate game manager type that's great for Kyle Shanahan's scheme, efficient. They don't really turn the ball over at all, really. The only problem is he lacks consistent usage from game to game because they have so many targets there. They have Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, and now they drafted Ricky Pearsall. That's a lot of mouths to feed, and it really just creates a lot of variance for George Kittle from game to game. He is, however, one of the best per route metric tight ends in the league. He's first in yards per route run with 2.3. He's first in yards per team pass attempt at 2.19. He also has a 21.9 dominator rating, which is 6th in the league for tight ends. What that means is his total market share of his team's yards and touchdowns, which when you consider how many mouths there are there, to be still 6th in the league in your dominator rating is really impressive. It just speaks to how talented he is. He's also number 3 in QB rating when targeted with a 122.3 QB rating when Purdy would target him. Great stuff. It's a great idea for them to target him. He's also 3rd with a 122.5 quarterback rating when targeted. This means it's a really good idea to target George Kittle. It'll produce points and yards for you. He's also 3rd in fantasy points per route with 0.46. He's also 2nd in fantasy points per target with 2.26. Now, Kittle has also struggled to be healthy. He's only had one fully healthy year in the last couple, and it really hurts his finish in terms of his total finishes in tight end 1, 2, 3, 4. He still always ends up really high, don't get me wrong, but he could always be a little bit better if he was just able to stay healthy. For instance, for his fantasy points per game the past 3 years, he's finished 6th, 2nd, and 4th respectively at the tight end position, with 12.7 this past year, 13.4 the year before, and 14.1 the year before that. So it really speaks to, if he was able to stay healthy, he averages one of the top points per game finishes of anybody. Now, this is also despite living in such a crowded receiving room that he can't always earn consistent targets. So it really speaks to the variance of his game, and any given week he could drop 30, 40 points for your team, and the other week he could drop 3 for you. I really think that there's going to be a drop-off soon for him, so he's probably only going to finish as a fringe top 5 tight end, maybe another year or two. Age is really catching up to him, and he's definitely lost a step. It's just he was so much better than most of the other tight ends that he's still an elite tight end. So enjoy him for what he's worth still. So my tight end 9 is Evan Ingram of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's 6'3", 234, and he is 29.8 years old, so quickly approaching 30. A decline is probably imminent sometime soon. He's not had the best track record historically with injuries, although I will say the past 2 years it hasn't really been an issue for him. So his career started off really well. He was a top 5 tight end as a rookie. He played in 15 games, then consistently had injury year after year after year. Then he went to Jacksonville 2 years ago, and the last 2 years he's magically been a top 5 tight end again. Usage plays a role in that. They like to give him short catches that allow him to use his speed to get yards after catch. It's great. He's perfect for this. He can also stretch the seams because he has 4.42 speed, at least at the time of his combine. So even if he's lost a step, he's still a 4.4 speed tight end. Really, really, really fast. Usually tight ends aren't in the 4.4s by any means. Now, he's attached to Trevor Lawrence, which is fantastic. Great quarterback. Not elite, but still a really good quarterback. Definitely underrated. People don't like him in fantasy. He's more of an NFL quarterback than a fantasy quarterback, but in terms of his role, he really does get consistent targets, like anywhere from 8 to maybe 10, 12, 14 sometimes. He even had 15 one game last year. Really heavy target volume. Now, his target share may decline just a little bit because they drafted Brian Thomas Jr. at pick 23 in the first round, and they did sign Gabe Davis, which is a little bit redundant. They're the same style of player, just Brian Thomas possesses a ton more upside. But this isn't really about them. It's about Evan Ingram. But what I mean to say is that target volume is probably going to decrease, even if just by a target or two per game. But the good news is it was so high to begin with that he could still be a top 10 tight end for sure, and maybe even a difference maker that's a little bit higher up on the list. Looking at his fantasy points per game, he's finished 4th, 7th, and 23rd the past 3 years. As I made note of earlier, he did switch teams from the Giants to Jacksonville 2 years ago, and we've seen a direct correlation with that move and extreme fantasy success. Usage plays a large part in that, as does Trevor Lawrence's love for him. It's also just that he's been able to stay healthy. He was such an inconsistent player for the Giants back in the day that it really made it hard for them to trust him, and their quarterback play really just wasn't good either. So the past 2 years, he's had 13.6 and 10.4 fantasy points per game. That's good for 4th and 7th. If he's able to stay healthy and keep these rates up, he really has top-end tight end upside. It's just, is he going to be able to? Is decline going to set in? We really don't know, but another thing is you're definitely not going to get as much as you should on the trade market for him. It's not only the old tight end thing, tight ends don't matter, whatever. It's just that there's this perception that he's not good, which couldn't be further from the truth. And he really does possess quite a bit of upside for you, and really a great floor in this offense. One thing to note about Ingram is he is a maven after the catch. Realistically, he'll remain a top-end tight end in terms of scoring for probably another couple of years. It's just, obviously, age matters so much, and it's valued so highly among the fantasy community that you're just not going to get what he's worth in a trade. So just hold on to him and enjoy the benefits of having a probable top 5, top 6 tight end. At tight end 9, we have Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. He's 6'5", 260, and is 34.7 years old, so quickly approaching age 35. He is on the decline. He's definitely lost a step, but he's still so good, and he was so much better than any other tight end in the league that even with his lost talent due to age, he's still elite and in the top tier in terms of actual talent. He's incredible. Here's a couple stats just to show you. He finished 4th in fantasy points per route among tight ends with 0.45. He also finished with a 10.8% juke rate, which was 2nd among tight ends, and really speaks to his advanced yards after catch abilities, even though he's getting older. He finished 3rd in yards per team pass attempt with 1.74. He also finished 4th among tight ends with 469 yards after catch this past year, which, considering he's going to be 35 years old, is absolutely out of this world. And really just speaks to how much better he was than all the other tight ends, considering he's lost a step and doing this still. Looking at his situation, he's there for at least another year. There's always a chance he retires, especially if they three-peat this year in the Super Bowl. But he could potentially play another 3 years, really, if he wanted to. He's still a lot better than most tight ends, and even if he continues to regress slightly, It won't matter. He's still that good. He's also connected to Patrick Mahomes, the consensus best quarterback in the NFL. They have a special connection they have for years. He's the primary focus of the offense. We'll see if that maintains when really Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice are all there. But if anything, that should really help him because it should free up more space for him to work over the middle of the field. If there's anything that speaks to how much better he was than everyone else, he's finished as a top 3 tight end every year since 2015. That is ridiculous. He was also the tight end 1 5 years in a row and 6 times total in those years since 2015. Absolutely ridiculous, top-level elite play from him. His points per game reflect this as well. He's finished first, and second the past 3 years in points per game with 14.6, 18.6, and 16.4. Really, looking at his career, it's been top shelf the entire time, and we may not really see very many tight ends in the future that are going to be able to match the type of career he's had. In terms of his value, you're definitely not going to get what he's worth in a trade. I would once again, just like these other guys, I would just hold on to him. It's not worth giving up the win now production for something that's just not going to match it. We may not see a tight end that's able to match his 18 point per game's peaks here. That's ridiculous. And he also had a resurgence in the playoffs, so maybe there is a little bit more left in the tank. I'd probably give him 2 more years of really being able to play at a high level. He could retire at any time, sure, but probably about 2 years more of that, and then maybe another 3rd year of being a good tight end to own. Obviously, once we get to age 38 with him, it's wishful thinking to think that he's going to be able to maintain this level of play. But man, if there's anybody that ever could, it would be Travis Kelce. It's incredible. Up next, at tight end 7, we have TJ Hockenson of the Minnesota Vikings. He's 6'5", 251, and just turned 27 years old. He, with Kirk Cousins, who just departed, was a PPR machine. With Kirk Cousins being gone, though, not really sure what J.J. McCarthy is going to do. We really didn't see very much out of J.J. McCarthy coming out of college. He would also be a little bit higher if he wasn't coming off a nasty knee injury suffered at the end of the year with a lot of ligament damage. It's probably going to keep him out till around week 8 or so. We're not exactly sure, but he's definitely not going to be ready for the beginning of the season. Speaking as to where he is in the offense, he kind of is the number 2 option, maybe number 3 after this injury. We're not really sure about that. Justin Jefferson is obviously the alpha in this offense. He's going to be the most targeted player. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Jordan Addison is also a young, ascending talent, so there's a good amount of mouths to feed. They also brought in Aaron Jones, who is a good, capable receiving back in his own right. So there's going to be a lot of mouths to feed in this offense, and with a rookie quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, who wasn't considered an elite prospect, I'm not sure about his short-term upside when he gets back, but if anything, he should be a quarterback's best friend, and J.J. McCarthy should definitely like throwing him the ball, that's for sure. He's finished as the tight end 4 and tight end 2 in the past 2 years, so elite top-end production, and he's been a difference maker for your teams, most importantly. Something to consider with him is his market value is suppressed right now due to his injury, and you should be able to get him on the low for a reasonable price. People will pay exorbitant amounts for an elite difference-making tight end, but he's one that if you're in a full point or 0.75 tight end premium league, which means 1.75 or 2 points per catch, he provides you with a big boost because he's a target monster who gets a lot more receptions, and that gives him a big boost in that format. And obviously he's valuable in a start 2 tight end league. Looking into some individual stats about Hockenson, he finished 6th in fantasy points per route with 0.44. He finished 5th in yards per route run with 1.94. He also finished 1st in expected fantasy points per game with 17.7. He finished 2nd with a 25.2% market share of his team's passes, And with Jordan Addison at receiver ascending, this may go down just a little bit, and his total volume will likely go down just because, like they did at Michigan, the Vikings probably aren't going to want to have McCarthy throwing the ball a ton. They're probably going to want him to be at best a game manager when he even plays. And there's a chance he doesn't play until halfway through the year. We're not really sure. They have announced that they don't intend to start him immediately, which is great for him. You don't want his confidence to get busted when he's really tested at the NFL level. Hockenson will be a mainstay in the mid to elite tight end ranks for years to come. He's only 27 years old. He may take a little bit of time to come back from the injury, but once again, buy low while you still can. He is a difference maker, especially in the proper formats. He probably has a good 5 to 6 years left of elite fantasy dominance at the tight end position. Alright, my tight end 6 is Mark Andrews. As a Ravens fan, gosh, I love this man. He is so good. And he's one of the few tight ends, like Travis Kelce, that's the actual number one target for their own team. That is rare, and that really speaks to his talent and also the general lack of talent the Ravens have had historically at the wide receiver position, although Zay Flowers is good in his own right. So Mark Andrews is 6'5", and he is 28.8 years old. He did come back at the end of the year off an injury, and he looked not quite as good as you would expect, but it's all good. He'll have an entire off season to recover. He is a type 1 diabetic, though, so that is one thing to note. It really does prevent him from healing from injuries quite as easily as some other people, but to be fair, he has an NFL training staff behind him and doctors, so he has advantages that most of us will never have in life in that regard. Looking at a couple stats for him, he finished first among tight ends in fantasy points per route with 0.5. That is elite top shelf production. He finished third among tight ends in fantasy points per target with 2.22. Still, right up there at the top. He finished with an absurd 35.1% dominator rating, which is his total amount of the team's pass yards and touchdowns. And once again, like I said, that speaks to how much of the offense he truly is. That kind of dominator rating is absolutely earned. If you are not talented, you are not getting that many of your team's yards and touchdowns. He finished second in yards per team pass attempt with 1.89, once again right at the top. He also finished fourth with a 22.2% target share, which really speaks more so to the ground and pound Ravens approach that they've had. They were a little bit more pass friendly, but they really do prefer to run the ball, and Derrick Henry is in town, so you can definitely expect a lot more running of the football, especially towards December when they're looking to salt away victories against defenses that are going to have absolutely no interest in tackling him. Now, he did get hurt and finished as the tight end 15 this past year, but he was a top 6 tight end the past 4 years combined before that, and really there's no signs of him slowing down. And obviously he got injured, but when he was playing this past year, especially pre-injury, he was right on pace for where he had finished before. There's no signs of him slowing down. You, once again, just like Hockenson before him, you still might be able to get him for a discount due to the age factor. People are terrified of age in fantasy, which is fine. You can take advantage of that, but you also don't want to get caught holding the bag and be stuck with somebody that retires. You want to get value while you can, but he's still probably a good 3 to 4 years from really declining, so if you're looking for a championship and you can pick him up for a reasonable price, do it. Looking at his fantasy points per game, he's finished as a top 5 tight end in that regard the past 3 years. So, like I said, even this past year, he was still a top 5 tight end in fantasy points per game. It's just his total finish was 15th because of injury. But the last 3 years, he's had 13.5, 12.7, and 17.7 respectively. Now, that 17.7 is Travis Kelce level of production and was definitely unsustainable. He's the focal point of the offense. Zay Flowers, the receiver, is ascending. He has a good talent. He's a great yards after catch guy. Awesome. He's not usurping Mark Andrews. That's just not happening. Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson have a special connection that cannot be broken, and as long as Andrews is able to stay healthy, you have nothing to worry about. Like I said, with TJ Hockenson, you could maybe get him for a vet discount as well as an injury discount, and if you can, enjoy the next 4 years of win-now production. He is going to finish as a mid to elite tight end almost for sure. Get him while you can. So my tight end 5 is my first and only rookie tight end. This is a bit of a projection, but man, Brock Bowers is such a great prospect. So he's 6'3", 243, so a bit in the Sam LaPorta build, not so much a Travis Kelce big, or Kittle especially. Although to be fair, he shares a lot of similarities with George Kittle in the way he plays. He's only 21 and a half years old, so he definitely is nowhere near his ceiling and is a decently young prospect, so age is of no concern here. The only concern is he's on the Raiders. So there's a couple ways to look at this. Their quarterback situation is absolute garbage. I love Gardner Minshew as a person. As a quarterback, as mid as it gets. AOC, Aiden O'Connell, is no different. Definitely worse in my opinion than Gardner Minshew. He deserves to be catching passes from somebody better. Also, Antonio Pierce is a defensive-minded head coach that likes to run the ball a lot, so also not great, but man, he is as heralded as a tight end prospect as probably Kyle Pitts was coming out, and we saw what Kyle Pitts did his rookie year. But back to Brock Bowers, the situation in terms of where he is as a target is kind of debatable. He's at worst going to be the second target. The only issue is they drafted Michael Mayer in the second round this past year. So it was kind of a strange pick, to be honest, because, I mean, they're going to have to run 2 tight end sets to be able to justify picking these players. So the good news, though, is Brock Bowers has positional versatility. He can play any position on the field, X receiver, Z receiver, slot, inline tight end. He can even play H-back, anything you want. He is as versatile of a weapon as there is in the NFL. Now, he's probably behind Davante Adams for sure, I'd imagine, in the pecking order of targets, but Davante Adams is aging. There's always a chance Adams gets traded. Brock Bowers is going to eat his targets. He was picked 13th in the draft, so really there's no concern in terms of them using him. They're going to want to justify their selection. And they're not Arthur Smith. They don't plan to make Michael Mayer the elite tight end prospect over Brock Bowers and just have him waste away doing nothing. If anything, they want both to succeed, and they both can, depending on what they do with their 2 tight end sets. But Brock Bowers is an elite prospect. A couple stats from Georgia. So, one thing to note is tight ends are never featured. Let me rephrase. Tight ends are very rarely featured in college. He had a 20% market share of the targets as a freshman, and 16 and 16 respectively the past 2 years. Still elite numbers for a tight end in college. That just shows you how valuable and how versatile he is, that he's able to be used in all these ways and get this kind of a market share of the team's passing. He also had 13 touchdowns as a freshman, and he combined for 13 the next 2 years, but it really shows that he is a weapon in the red zone, and one thing is he can score from any point on the field. He can rip off a 70-yard touchdown, break a tackle. He's a great yards after catch guy. This guy reminds me so much of George Kittle. It would not shock me in the least if he finishes as a recurring top 3 tight end once he's gotten his feet wet after a couple years. As I said earlier, he had a 20% target share in his freshman year, followed by 2 seasons at 16%. Absolutely elite stuff. The Raiders are going to use him all over the field. They're going to use a lot of 2 tight end sets so that they can justify their selections the past 2 years. And outside of Davante Adams, there is no one on this team that deserves nearly as many targets as him. And one thing to consider is with worse quarterbacks, a lot of the time they will target the tight end position because it's an easy, safe completion. And Brock Bowers is as safe as a completion as it really gets. This guy is going to be a maven after the catch. He's going to break off long touchdowns, truck people. He's great. He has amazing vision. He's going to be used up the seams, in the flats, on drag routes, over the middle of the field. Anything you want, he can do. He is going to be a weapon year after year after year and is going to finish as a recurring high-end tight end one. Good luck trading for him. If you're going to trade for him, you might as well just do it now or pray that he somehow doesn't have a great rookie year. Because, man, if he is as good as everyone, including myself, thinks he is, it's going to be impossible to trade for him. If you remember Kyle Pitts a couple years ago after his rookie year, I don't even want to know how many first-round picks that owner would have wanted for him. He's only 21 and a half years old, so you can enjoy probably a good 11 to 12 years from him realistically, and you'll certainly enjoy them for years to come. All right, my tight end 4 is Kyle Pitts. One disclaimer, I am absolutely biased for Kyle Pitts. I am in love with Kyle Pitts' game. He is a unicorn, and he is finally going to be able to be used how he was intended to be used. He has so much unrealized upside, and here's why. He had 1,000 yards receiving as a rookie. There's only 2 tight ends that have ever done that before. He's one of them. Mike Ditka is the other. This doesn't happen. People have lambasted him when it is not his fault he has not produced the past 2 years. Would you be able to produce with Arthur Smith there as your coach, with Taylor Heineke, Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota as your quarterbacks? No. I can't imagine. Travis Kelce would have suffered under those circumstances. Luckily, though, all of those problems are completely gone. Zach Robinson was brought in, the Rams passing game coordinator, to be their offensive coordinator. So imagine a Rams offense. Gosh, they don't ever score points, do they? One thing about Pitts is he received the biggest quarterback upgrade of any tight end in the game. And he didn't receive 1, he received 2. He's going from Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke, and Marcus Mariota to Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix Jr. That is an immense step up in talent. You want to know how terrible the targets he received were? Here's a couple stats for you. His target quality rating was 37th in the league, and his catchable target rating was also 37th in the league, worse than the 32 starting tight ends. That's how bad his quarterback play was. He was also coming off a multi-ligament injury, just like TJ Hockenson suffered at the end of this past year. It really hampered his side-to-side agility and really made it hard for him to run proper routes. But one thing is, if you look at his highlights, and please watch some highlights, he was still able to come down with some tough contested catches that were only made difficult because of how terrible his quarterback play was. He finished 9th in true catch rate with a 93% catch rate, which is astounding considering how bad his quarterback play was. But not only that, he finished with a 61.9% contested catch rate, which was 7th among tight ends. Once again, with horrible quarterback play. Now, as far as where he is in the offense, he is going to be the number 2 target behind Drake London, but he should receive over 20% target share, probably creeping towards 25%, and the targets will actually be good, because Kirk Cousins made TJ Hockenson what he is today. Kirk Cousins, even if he doesn't come back, they drafted Michael Penix. Michael Penix has no fear and will chuck the ball up to his good players. He now has gone from no good quarterback play for the last 2 years. Really, Matt Ryan was a shell of his former self when he had 1,000 receiving yards as a rookie. So this is probably going to be the first really good quarterback play he's ever received. In a brand new scheme that's not going to feature backup tight ends and 4-string receivers and use their star players as decoys like Arthur Smith just loves to do. And you can expect elite tight end production. It would not shock me in the least if he was the overall tight end 1 this year. He is that talented. Another thing, because he hasn't delivered the past 2 years, not his fault, you can get him for so much cheaper than you ever were before. You had to pay at least 2 firsts and probably more than that in order to get him. You could probably just get him for one single first. There are people that are desperately trying to get rid of him. I want all of the Kyle Pitts I can get. Thank you. You will regret trading me Kyle Pitts very soon. Enjoy having an elite tight end under 24 years old in an ascending offense with not one but 2 good quarterbacks for years and years and years. They picked up his 5th-year option, so he's still there for at least 2 years, and there's a great chance they re-sign him. He's going to be fantastic. Get him while you can. Now, when looking at his fantasy points per game, you're going to notice that they're not as high as the other guys on this list. I'm not going to explain why, but just for the sake of it, he finished as the tight end 16, 22, and 11th in the past 3 years, the only 3 years of his career, with 8.1, 7.6, and 10.4 respectively. These numbers are going to go way, way up now. This guy is so talented, and it just hurts my soul to see the slander of Kyle Pitts. People are going to eat their words. Get him while you can. You will not regret it. He is going to be a mainstay for your team, and he is going to be a tight end that actually matters, especially if you're in a tight end premium or a start 2 tight end league. Get him while you can. Alright, my tight end 3 is Dalton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills. He's 6'4", 246, and is 24.7, so approaching age 25, which he was a really old prospect coming out. Kyle Pitts, for instance, has played 3 years and is younger than him. However, he is the top option in the Bills' passing game, with an elite quarterback in Josh Allen throwing him the ball. He should be a sponge this year, and it should shock nobody if he finishes as, first of all, the most targeted tight end, and as the number 1 overall fantasy tight end. It could absolutely happen. The Bills got rid of Stephon Diggs. They brought in Keon Coleman. I really don't like the fit for him. See, the Bills use a vertical X receiver, and that was always Gabe Davis before, but Gabe Davis was quick and fast, which you want from your vertical X. Keon Coleman is neither quick nor fast. Not the move. It's not going to help. He is not built for what they said that they're going to use him for. He projects more as a big slot, kind of like a Rashee Rice, Amon-Ra St. Brown, although he's not as talented as either one of them in my opinion, but still, with him being misused, at least in my opinion, I think that's going to lead to more targets for Dalton Kincaid because I don't think Keon Coleman's going to be successful in that endeavor. As far as the other options, they have Khalil Shakir, they have Curtis Samuel. Nobody that's going to demand targets in the passing game. They have a fine receiving back in James Cook, but really nobody to take away targets. And with the exodus of talent from the Bills' defense, including star cornerback Tre'Davious White, they're going to need to be able to pass the ball in order to stay in games, and Josh Allen's going to have to throw to somebody. As far as his stats, he finished 16th in the NFL among tight ends with a 1.48 yards per route run. He also finished 14th in the league with a 1.23 yards per team pass attempt. He also finished 14th in the NFL among tight ends as a rookie with a 2.02 target separation. So he's relatively good at being able to get open. He's the only real credible threat, at least a proven one, in the passing game. The targets have to go to somebody. They're from Josh Allen. The defense isn't going to be very good. Dalton Kincaid should be on the rise. He should be valued as an elite tight end because, boy, is he going to put up points this year. As far as his fantasy points per game, he was 14th among tight ends with 9.4 this past year. Pretty good. They had Stephon Diggs there, so he wasn't the number 1 target, so that kind of explains that, as well as being a rookie. Historically, rookie tight ends almost never hit, so for him to have had the season he did is pretty incredible. I mean, he finished as the tight end 11, which is absolutely respectable. Kyle Pitts, for instance, with his tremendous rookie season, was the tight end 6 that year, and tight end scoring year to year is kind of fluky, so any given year, that exact amount of points he scored could be higher or lower. And once again, he's connected to Josh Allen. He's only in the second year of his contract, so he has 3 more years guaranteed, including this year, and then a potential fifth-year option, and there's always the chance that he gets extended. And as far as this year goes, at least, he is the bona fide number one target. No one's going to out-target him among the Bills. And in the future, they may have to address that because I don't think they can really be rolling around with Keon Coleman at X, Khalil Shakir in the slot, and Curtis Samuel at Z. That's not a recipe for a potent passing offense, even though you have Josh Allen and Dalton Kincaid. So expect the situation to change this next year, but at least for this year, the sky is the absolute limit. And Dalton Kincaid should be expected to be at the very least a mid to elite tight end pretty much every given year for the rest of his tenure with the Bills at least. I view him as slightly less talented than some of the tight ends that are going to be before him and a little bit after him, but he's still a very good tight end, and the situation is the best in the NFL for a tight end at least. It does not get better than being the only option in a Buffalo team that's going to be throwing the ball a ton with a bad defense with Josh Allen throwing the ball to you. Expect a monster season. My tight end 2, and this will probably surprise some people, is Sam LaPorta. He's the consensus tight end 1, and I absolutely understand why. There's a couple reasons why he's my 2 instead of 1, but I view him, my number 1, and Dalton Kincaid, who is number 3, all in the same tier anyways, so to me it's really just contingent on what you're looking for in a tight end, and they're somewhat interchangeable to me. I would not trade any one for the other straight up. So Sam LaPorta is 6'3", 245. He's 23.4 years old, so still relatively young and an ascending talent. He went to Detroit, and man, was this a great situation for him. A potent rushing game, lots of point scoring, and he's not the only target, so it's impossible to just focus enough defensive tension on him to really slow him down. He has Amon-Ra, who is the main guy that defenses need to worry about, but also Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in the backfield. Jameson Williams to take the top off and scare defenses deep. It really just prevents any defenses from really scheming against him. With that, though, and why he's not my number 1 is total targets. I really don't expect him to really receive very many more targets, and his production game to game is going to be a little bit more fluky than who I have at number 1, in my opinion. So when you have first of all a coach in Dan Campbell that loves to run the ball, whenever they're winning, he's going to try to run as much as he possibly can, as is evidenced by how he got David Montgomery hurt trying to run the ball so much with them early in the season. And thankfully Jahmyr Gibbs didn't really have too many injuries, but once Jahmyr Gibbs was the only running back in the game against the Ravens, you saw how much work he got, and especially against the Raiders. He had over 25 carries. This man loves to run the ball when he can, and with them selecting 2 cornerbacks in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft to help keep up with the rest of their division, the Bears especially, you should probably expect them to not necessarily need to pass as much as they did this past year when their defense was horrible, straight up trash. And therefore his game-to-game consistency, in my opinion, is not going to be as good as you want, but the highs are going to be very, very high. He could score 30 points in a game, and it would not be shocking to anybody. But he's also, I think, going to see a more 10, 9, 8-point games because of his lack of consistent target getting per game. So his fantasy points per game was 14.1 in his rookie year, which was good for 3rd in the NFL. He finished as the tight end 1, and that's just because he didn't deal with injuries, which is a credit to him. I just don't know how much more upside he is really going to have. I don't see him really getting that many more targets. He's definitely not taking them away from Amon-Ra St. Brown. They've stated publicly how they want to get Jahmyr Gibbs more involved. As to whether they use Jahmyr Gibbs as a slot receiver or not, it's inconsequential. They're going to give him more total targets. Even David Montgomery gets a fair amount of targets. So, and especially with their desire to want to run the ball as much as they can, especially when they're leading, along with an improved defense, you shouldn't expect a lot more points than he scored this past year. And if anything, I think he might be a slight regression candidate. And touchdowns are extremely fluky as well. For instance, he had 10 this past year. He could repeat that. Don't get me wrong. He's very talented, but I wouldn't count on 10 every year. It's just unrealistic. A couple of stats, though, to show how truly elite he is, though, as a tight end. He had the 6th best QB rating when targeted at 110 among tight ends. He finished 2nd in points per route with 0.48. He finished 4th in fantasy points per target with 1.99. He had a dominator rating of 26.3, which is 3rd in the NFL among tight ends. Very, very high. He was 8th in yards per team pass attempt with 1.47. And he's decent after the catch as well with 358 yards after the catch, which is good for 7th among tight ends. So statistically and according to metrics, he's also an elite tight end. And it's evident when you watch him play as well. Very elite tight end. He's possibly a sell candidate if you can get one of these other tight ends plus something for him. In my opinion, this is probably about his peak, at least unless there's an exodus of talent on the Lions' offense. But enjoy having an elite tight end 1 for years to come if you choose to keep him. And if you're looking to trade for him, it's probably not a good time because his value is going to be where Pitts was a couple years ago. It's just not worth to pay a price at these. It's not worth to pay 2+ first for a tight end, really, unless they're Travis Kelce when they're younger. So I would probably wait until his value might cool off a little bit because he is a regression candidate. All right, my tight end 1 is Trey McBride of the Arizona Cardinals. So he's going to be the number 2 target on the offense, with Marvin Harrison Jr., and deservedly so, being selected 4th overall. Expect a little bit of a regression in total target rate, but expect him to receive better targets because defenses aren't going to be able to pay as much attention to him. He was the only credible receiving threat, especially after Hollywood Brown was hurt at the beginning of the season. He's going into his 3rd year, so he's still connected to Arizona for at least 2 years. We'll see if he gets a contract extension. Either way, he's going to be an elite tight end. So let's take a look at some metrics. Keep in mind that the first half of the year he was encumbered by Zach Ertz being there, and it really hurt his total stats, but wait till you see his efficiency metrics. We're talking potentially Travis Kelce elite. He finished 5th in fantasy points per route at 0.45, incredibly high. He finished 5th with target separation with 2.28. He finished 9th in dominator rating with 20.4%, and that's considering half the year he was a split-time tight end. That's incredible. He would have been much higher if he had been the starter the entire year. He's also great at catching the ball. He finished 3rd with a 94.3 true catch rate. Great elite stuff. He finished 2nd in yards per route run with 2.03. Very, very high. And finished 6th in yards per team pass attempt with 1.49. He also had a 26.1 target rate, which was 1st among tight ends, and really just speaks to how good he is because you don't earn targets if you're not talented. Essentially, he was behind a former elite tight end who he kicked out of town and established himself as the clear one. He has a connection with Kyler Murray. Trust is really important with receiving tight ends and their quarterbacks. And man, the upside with him is surreal, especially now that defenses can't simply just focus straight up on him. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to open up so many targets for him. Looking at his fantasy points per game, he finished 8th this past year and 40th the year before that. In his rookie year, he was a backup tight end. He was drafted in the 2nd round. He was really a great prospect. I'm surprised he didn't do more his rookie year, but kicking Zach Ertz out of town, taking over, and finishing with the metrics he did as a tight end shows that he is really talented. And bumping up to a top 10 fantasy points per game, and once again, that's including, and that number is only that low because half the year he was a split-time tight end. If he had been a full-time tight end the entire year, that number would have been top 3, no doubt about it. This year, we're going to see what it really could look like for him. This guy is going to be expensive for you to buy. He probably already is expensive. I personally am not looking to sell him unless I can get a tight end in the exact same tier plus, or a big enough plus with a tight end in a tier below to make it really worth it. But man, the sky's the limit for him, and I think he's going to end up being the new Travis Kelce, assuming they don't add a bunch more receiving talent in the offense. This guy is elite as it gets, and his yards per route run metric proves that. Get him if you can. This guy is going to be a real difference maker. So to review, in my C tier, I had George Kittle at 10, Evan Ingram at 9, Travis Kelce at 8. In the B tier, I had TJ Hockenson at 7 and Mark Andrews at 6. In the A tier, I had Brock Bowers at 5, Kyle Pitts at 4. And in the S tier, I had Dalton Kincaid at 3, Sam LaPorta at 2, and my number 1 tight end was Trey McBride of the Arizona Cardinals. Alright, and that concludes the tight end rankings video. Is there something you agree with, disagree with? Should I have someone else in these rankings? Should I have somebody higher, lower? Please let me know in the comments section. Let's get some engagement going. Please like and subscribe. It would mean the world to me. I would love to be able to do this full time and give y'all amazing content 24/7 and be able to do lengthy content, more rapid content, be able to be on top of it all the time. Also, please let me know how I'm doing and what you would like to see in future videos. I would love to make content that is tailored to exactly what you want. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you, and have a good day.